The shuttle carrying Ambassador Elena Vasquez approached the massive structure that hung in the darkness of space, like a jewel carved from starlight. The Galactic Council chamber orbited Centrum Prime, a neutral world chosen thousands of years ago when the great civilizations first came together to end their wars. Elena had seen pictures, of course. Every human who followed galactic news had seen the council chamber. But seeing it in person made her chest tighten with a mixture of awe and apprehension. The structure was enormous, easily the size of a small moon. Graceful towers spiraled upward from a central sphere, each one representing a different member species of the council. Lights flickered across its surface like stars being born and dying in fast forward. The whole thing seemed to pulse with an inner radiance that had nothing to do with reflected sunlight. This was power made manifest. This was where the fate of entire civilizations was decided with words instead of weapons. Elena straightened her uniform, a simple black suit with minimal decoration. She had chosen it carefully. Not too military, not too casual. Earth had only been part of the galactic community for 15 years, barely a heartbeat in cosmic terms. They were still the new kids, still learning the rules, still trying to find their place among beings whose civilizations had spanned millennia before humans even discovered fire. The shuttle docked with a gentle thump that Elena barely felt. She stood followed by her small team. There was Marcus Chen, her military advisor, a former naval officer whose calm demeanor hid a sharp tactical mind. Beside him stood Dr. Amara Okonkwo, the xenocultural specialist who had written half of Earth's protocols for dealing with alien species. Rounding out the group was James Kim, a young diplomatic aide who had learned 6 alien languages in the past 3 years. The airlock opened with a hiss. Beyond it stood a Thrizon attendant, its multiple limbs moving in a pattern that Elena's translator chip identified as a formal greeting. The Thrizon were one of the oldest species in the council, beings that looked like a cross between an octopus and a praying mantis, with skin that shimmered through different colors as they communicated. Ambassador Vasquez, the translator, rendered the Thrizon's harmonic speech into flat English. "You are expected. Please follow." They walked through corridors that seemed to shift and change as they moved. Elena knew it was some kind of advanced technology, spaces that reconfigured themselves based on who was using them. The walls showed images of various worlds, beautiful planets with impossible colors and strange geometries. None of them were Earth. The Thrazin led them to a waiting area outside the main council chamber. Other delegations milled about, representatives of species Elena had only read about. There were the Lumina, beings that looked like floating crystals that hummed with inner light. A group of Karvesh warriors stood in one corner, their forearms folded in identical poses, their armor gleaming. The Karvesh were the galaxy's warrior caste, though Elena had learned they hadn't fought a real war in over 500 years. No one acknowledged the human delegation. A few glances came their way, brief and dismissive before the other species returned to their own conversations. Elena felt Marcus tense beside her. She touched his arm lightly, a gesture that said, "Be patient, not yet." They waited for nearly an hour. It was a deliberate slight, Elena knew, a reminder that humanity was at the bottom of the galactic hierarchy. Finally, the massive doors to the council chamber swung open. The Thrazon attendant gestured for them to enter. The chamber took Elena's breath away. It was vast, with a ceiling so high it seemed to fade into infinity. Thousands of seats rose in tiers around a central speaking platform. Most were empty, but the important ones, the ones that mattered, were filled. Elena recognized them from her briefings. At the highest tier sat High Arbiter Zelthrin, a Thrazon so old that parts of its body had begun to crystallize. It was said that Zelthrin had been alive when humans were still living in caves. Its multiple eyes tracked the human delegation as they made their way to the speaking platform. To Zelthrin's right hovered the Lumina Chorus Prime, a cluster of 7 crystals that spun in a slow orbit around each other. The Lumina were a collective consciousness, beings of pure energy housed in crystalline matrices. They communicated through light and harmonic frequencies that human ears couldn't hear without assistance. On Zelthrin's left sat Warcast Throm of the Karvesh Empire. He was massive, easily 8 feet tall, with forearms that ended in hands capable of crushing steel. His armor was ornate, covered in symbols that denoted centuries of service. But his eyes, Elena noticed, looked bored. Like a wolf kept too long in a cage, fed well but never allowed to hunt. There were others, representatives of dozens of species, But these three were the ones that mattered. These were the powers that truly ran the Galactic Council. Elena stepped onto the speaking platform. A beam of light illuminated her from above, and she felt the weight of thousands of years of civilization looking down at her. She squared her shoulders and waited. Zelthrun spoke first. Its voice was rendered into English by the translation matrix, but Elena could hear the harmonics underneath, layers of meaning that human ears couldn't fully process. Ambassador Elena Vasquez of Earth, you have been summoned to address concerns that have arisen regarding your species' activities in galactic space. Elena inclined her head. High Arbiter, the people of Earth are honored to appear before the Council. We are eager to address any concerns. Honored. The Lumina Chorus Prime's voice chimed like bells. Yet your species expands across space with unseemly haste. 12 new colonies in 3 years. Mining operations in contested territories, and your military presence grows with each passing cycle. Marcus shifted slightly behind Elena, but she kept her face neutral. The colonies you mention are in unclaimed space as verified by Council survey teams. Our mining operations comply with all established regulations. And our military presence is proportional to our population and territorial responsibilities. Proportional, Warcast Throm rumbled. His voice was deep, like stones grinding together. Your species maintains more warships per capita than any other council member. You conduct military exercises with live weapons. Your soldiers train for combat scenarios that have not occurred in this galaxy for 3,000 years. Here it was, the real reason for the summons. Elena had suspected as much, but hearing it stated so bluntly confirmed her fears. The council wasn't concerned about human expansion. They were afraid of human military capability. Humanity maintains a defense force appropriate to our security needs, Elena said carefully. We have threatened no one. We have attacked no one. We have honored every treaty and agreement we have made. Yet, Zelthrun's harmonics carried a note that the translator rendered as concern. We have studied your species' history, Ambassador. Over 200 documented wars in your recorded history. Conflicts that killed millions. Weapons that could sterilize your entire world. Your people have practiced the art of destruction with a dedication that troubles the Council. The chamber fell silent. Elena felt the weight of that silence like a physical thing. This was the moment, she realized. This was when humanity would be defined in the eyes of the galaxy. Not by their achievements in science or art, but by their capacity for violence. It is true that humanity has a history of conflict, Elena said slowly. We do not hide from our past. We have fought wars. We have made terrible weapons. We have killed each other over land, resources, beliefs, and sometimes for no reason that makes sense in hindsight. But we have also learned from these conflicts. We have built a unified world government. We have eliminated poverty and disease. We have reached for the stars not to conquer but to grow. Pretty words, the Lumina chimed. But words do not change nature. A predator remains a predator, regardless of how well it has recently fed. Elena felt anger flash through her, hot and sudden, but she pushed it down. Anger would accomplish nothing here. With respect, Chorus Prime, you judge us by standards that you yourself have not had to meet. When was the last time the Lumina faced an existential threat? When did your people last have to choose between survival and extinction? The crystal spun faster, a sign of agitation. Before the Lumina could respond, Zelthrun raised one of its many limbs. Peace. The ambassador's question is reasonable if impolite. The answer, Ambassador, is 3,147 years ago. That was when the Great Burning nearly destroyed all civilized life in this galaxy. Since that time, we have learned to resolve our differences without warfare. We have evolved beyond such primitive solutions. Or perhaps you have simply forgotten how to fight, Marcus said quietly behind Elena. The chamber erupted. Species Elena couldn't even name began shouting in languages her translator struggled to process. Zelthrun's limbs moved in sharp, agitated patterns. The luminous crystals spun so fast they became a blur. Only Warcast Throm remained still, but Elena saw something flicker in his eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or respect. Elena turned and looked at Marcus with a warning glare. He had just said what she had been thinking, but this was not the time or place. Marcus met her gaze and gave a slight nod of apology. Zelthrun called for order. It took several minutes for the chamber to quiet down. When it did, the High Arbiter's harmonics carried an edge that needed no translation. Your military advisor forgets his place, Ambassador. Perhaps this demonstrates our concern precisely. Your species lacks the wisdom that comes with age. You are children playing with weapons you do not fully understand. We understand weapons very well, Elena said quietly. Perhaps better than you think. But High Arbiter, we came here to listen to your concerns and to find a path forward. What is it you want from Earth? Zelthrun exchanged glances with the Lumina and Throm. Some unspoken communication passed between them. When Zelthrun spoke again, its harmonics were formal, final. The Galactic Council has decided that humanity requires guidance. Protective oversight, if you will. You will submit to a military audit. Your warship production will be limited to defensive capabilities only. Your colonies will be subject to council inspection, and you will accept permanent council observers in your government and military institutions. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Elena felt her team react behind her. Dr. Okonkwo gasped softly. James Kim muttered something in Korean that the translator wisely didn't render. Marcus went very, very still in the way that combat veterans did when they were suppressing the urge to violence. Elena kept her voice level. You are asking us to submit to occupation. We are offering you protection, the Lumina corrected, from yourselves if necessary. And if we refuse, then you will find that galactic space becomes very difficult for lone species, Warcast Throm said. There was no emotion in his voice, just statement of fact. Trade embargoes, diplomatic isolation, perhaps more direct measures should they become necessary. There it was. The threat, delivered with the polite language of diplomacy but no less real for its wrapping. Submit or be destroyed. Elena had known this might happen. Earth's intelligence services had warned that the Council might react this way to humanity's growing presence. But knowing something intellectually and facing it in person were two very different things. I will need to consult with my government, Elena said. Of course, Zelthrun's harmonics carried something that might have been satisfaction. You have 48 of your hours to provide your answer. This session is concluded. The light above the platform winked out. The audience was over. Elena turned and led her team from the chamber, feeling the eyes of the galaxy on her back. Behind her, she heard the murmur of alien voices, discussing and dissecting what had just occurred. None of them sounded sympathetic. They made it back to the shuttle in silence. Only when the airlock sealed and they were alone did Marcus finally speak. They're terrified of us. They should be, Dr. Okonkwo said quietly. They've built a civilization on the premise that warfare is obsolete. We're walking proof that it's not. Elena sat down heavily in her seat. Her hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. James, open a quantum link to Earth. Priority 1. I need to speak with the Security Council immediately. As James hurried to comply, Elena looked out the viewport at the Galactic Council chamber, that monument to order and ancient power. It looked smaller now, less impressive. Not a temple to civilization, but a cage that its inhabitants had built for themselves. And humanity, she thought, was about to show them what happened when you tried to cage something that still remembered how to be free. Elena couldn't sleep. The guest quarters provided by the council were luxurious, with walls that displayed calming images from a dozen different worlds, and a bed that automatically adjusted to her body shape. But comfort couldn't quiet her racing mind. She kept replaying the session, hearing Zelthrun's harmonics, seeing the contempt in the Lumina's crystalline facets, feeling the weight of Warcast Throm's predatory gaze. 48 hours. That's all they had to decide the future of humanity's place in the galaxy. She had spoken with Earth's Security Council for 3 hours after returning to the shuttle. The conversation had been tense, angry, but ultimately productive. The Council had given her authorization to proceed with what she had requested. Now she just had to follow through. At 400 by Earth Standard Time, Elena gave up on sleep. She dressed in casual clothes and made her way through the empty corridors of the diplomatic quarter. Her destination was the archives, a public repository of galactic history that any council member could access. She had sent Dr. Okonkwo there hours ago. Time to see what they had found. The archives were housed in a tower that seemed to exist partially outside normal space. Elena's head hurt trying to look at it directly. The entrance shimmered like oil on water, and stepping through it felt like walking through cold honey. On the other side, she found herself in a vast circular chamber, lined with what looked like stars captured in amber. Dr. Okonkwo sat at a terminal in the center, her dark face illuminated by 3 holographic displays. She looked exhausted but animated in the way she always did when she found something interesting. Marcus stood behind her, arms crossed, studying the displays with a soldier's eye for tactical detail. "Tell me you found something useful," Elena said by way of greeting. Amara spun her chair around. "Elena, you need to see this. The galaxy's history is nothing like what they teach in the basic orientation materials. Show me." Amara gestured at the displays. Images flickered to life showing worlds Elena didn't recognize. Beautiful planets with impossible architecture. Civilizations that looked like they had grown rather than been built. This is the galaxy 3,000 years ago, give or take a few decades. It was a golden age. Hundreds of species working together, pushing the boundaries of science and art. They had technology we still don't understand. They could manipulate space-time like we manipulate clay. And then, Elena prompted, and then they went to war. The images changed, showing destruction on a scale that made Elena's stomach clench. Entire planets cracked open like eggs, stars going supernova, the fabric of space itself seeming to tear apart. They called it the Great Burning. It lasted for 200 years. By the time it ended, 90% of galactic civilization was gone. Entire species extinct. Worlds rendered uninhabitable for millions of years. Technology lost that they still haven't recovered. Marcus leaned forward. "What were they fighting about?" "That's the interesting part," Amara said. "No one knows. Or if they do know, they've scrubbed it from the public records. The archives have detailed accounts of battles, casualty figures, technological specifications of weapons that make our nuclear arsenals look like fireworks. But nowhere does it say what actually started the war." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. They're ashamed. More than that, Amara brought up another display, this one showing what looked like legal documents. After the war ended, the survivors created the Council. But they didn't just create a government, they created a religion. The prevention of warfare became the galaxy's primary moral imperative. They outlawed entire categories of weapons. They instituted mandatory meditation programs. They restructured their societies to eliminate competition, aggression, territorial instincts. They lobotomized themselves, Marcus said flatly. "In a way, yes," Amara agreed. "Look at this. Carvish military doctrine from 3,000 years ago versus now." Two documents appeared side by side. Elena couldn't read the alien script, but she could see that one was hundreds of pages long while the other was barely a pamphlet. Ancient Carvesh were warriors in the truest sense. They studied strategy, tactics, logistics. They understood warfare as both art and science. Modern Carvesh are ceremonial. They wear armor and carry weapons, but they haven't fought a real war in 500 years. The last conflict they were involved in was a border dispute with the Vreen collective that consisted of filing legal briefs and economic sanctions. "What about the Thrizan?" Elena asked. "Zelthrun is ancient. It was alive during the Great Burning." Amara nodded and pulled up another file. The Thrizan were some of the worst offenders during the war. Their weapons operated on principles that violated the laws of physics as we understand them. They could reach back in time and murder entire species before they evolved. When the war ended, the Thrizan took a vow of absolute pacifism. They won't even defend themselves directly. It's all proxy forces and diplomatic maneuvering. Elena sat down slowly, her mind racing. So the entire galactic civilization is built on collective trauma. They're so terrified of another great burning that they've made themselves incapable of defending against anything. "Worse than that," Marcus said. He pointed at a star map on one of the displays. "They've ignored external threats. Look at this. There are 6 different hostile civilizations on the galactic rim that have been probing Council space for the last 1,000 years. Small raids, scouting missions, testing defenses. The Council's response has been to retreat. They give up border systems rather than fight for them. They call it strategic repositioning. It's cowardice, Elena said bluntly. It's survival, Amara corrected gently. They saw what warfare at that level could do. They chose a different path. We can't fault them for that. I can fault them for trying to force that path on us. Elena stood and paced around the terminal. They want to make us weak like they are. They want to strip away our ability to defend ourselves because our strength reminds them of what they've lost. Or what they fear they could become again, Amara said. Think about it, Elena. They look at humanity and they see themselves 3,000 years ago. Aggressive, expanding, militaristic. They're terrified that we'll start another great burning. Elena stopped pacing. Something was crystallizing in her mind, a strategy forming from fragments of information and intuition. How much of this is publicly available? All of it. Amara gestured at the archives around them. It's not hidden, just not emphasized. The Council doesn't talk about the Great Burning if they can avoid it. They teach that they've evolved beyond warfare, without really explaining what that evolution cost them. And humanity's history? Elena asked. How much do they actually know about us? Marcus pulled up a new display. This is the cultural briefing the Council has on file about Earth. It's incomplete. They know about World War II, the nuclear age, some of the major conflicts. But they don't understand context. They don't understand how those wars changed us. They see the numbers, the death tolls, the weapons, and they assume we're just another species that likes killing. Elena felt a smile tugging at her lips. It wasn't a pleasant smile. They think they understand violence because they remember the Great Burning. But they don't understand war. Not anymore. They just remember being afraid. What are you thinking? Amara asked cautiously. I'm thinking, Elena said slowly, that we need to give them a history lesson, a real one. Not the sanitized version they got from our first contact packages. They need to understand what makes humanity different. Different how? Marcus asked, though Elena could see he was already following her logic. They fought one war that almost destroyed them, and they never recovered. Elena said, We fought hundreds. We invented new ways to kill each other every century. We built weapons that could destroy our entire world 100 times over. We came so close to extinction that we could taste it. And we chose to step back from that edge. Not because we forgot how to fight. Not because we made ourselves weak. But because we understood the true cost of warfare and decided peace was worth working for. She turned to face them both. The Council thinks warfare is like a virus that will infect us and lead to another great burning. They don't understand that we're already vaccinated. We've had the disease. We survived it, and we're stronger for it. Amara was nodding slowly. You want to show them that our capacity for violence is exactly what makes our commitment to peace meaningful. More than that, Elena said. I want to show them that their evolved civilization is built on a foundation of fear and weakness. And when the next real threat comes, and it will come, they're going to need us. Marcus grinned, and it was a wolf's grin, all teeth and anticipation. You're going to threaten them. No, Elena corrected. I'm going to give them a choice. Accept us as equals with all that implies, or we walk away, and when their carefully constructed peace falls apart, we won't be there to help pick up the pieces. That's incredibly risky, Amara said. If they decide we're too dangerous, they could move against us directly. We've only got a few dozen ships in Council space. Earth is weeks away by FTL. They could cut us off, isolate us, maybe even destroy our colonies before we could respond. They could try, Marcus said. But they won't because Warcast Throm knows. Elena looked at him sharply. Knows what? That we'd win, Marcus said simply. I saw it in his eyes during the session. He's a warrior, even if he hasn't been allowed to be one for generations. He looked at us and he saw what we are. And it excited him. Terrified him too, maybe. But mostly excited him. Because we represent something he thought was lost forever. Elena remembered Throm's expression. That flicker of recognition when Marcus had made his comment about the Council forgetting how to fight. Marcus was right. Throm had seen something in them that the others had missed. How long until we need to give our answer? She asked. Amara checked her implant. 36 hours now. Then we have time, Elena said. I need you to compile everything you found into a presentation. I want a complete history of the Great Burning, the Council's formation, and how their society has changed since then. Marcus, I need you to put together a comparative analysis. Galactic military capacity versus human capabilities. Be honest, but be thorough. What are you going to do? Amara asked. I'm going to call Earth, Elena said. And then I'm going to ask for a full Council session. Public broadcast across all member worlds. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it in front of everyone. She left them working and made her way back to her quarters. The quantum communicator there was already active. A priority channel held open for her use. She sat down in front of it and composed herself. What she was about to propose was going to seem insane. It might actually be insane, but she had learned something important in the archives. The galaxy thought it had evolved beyond war. It thought it had found a higher path, but what it had really done was make itself incapable of survival. In a universe that didn't care about anyone's moral evolution, the strong survived. The weak were consumed. That was the oldest law in existence, written in the stars themselves. Humanity knew that law. They had been shaped by it, tested by it, hardened by it, and now they had a choice. They could let the galaxy make them weak, strip away the strength that had carried them from caves to starships. Or they could stand firm and show these ancient civilizations what real strength looked like. Elena opened the channel. Secretary General Adeyemi's face appeared, his expression grave. Behind him, she could see the other members of the Security Council gathered. Ambassador Vasquez, Adeyemi said formally. We've been waiting for your call. Have you reached a decision? I have, sir, Elena said. But you're not going to like it? His eyebrow rose slightly. Tell me, so she did. She laid out everything she had learned, everything she had planned. She spoke for 20 minutes without interruption. When she finished, the silence from Earth stretched for long seconds. Finally, Adeyemi leaned back in his chair. You want to threaten the entire Galactic Council? No, sir, Elena corrected. I want to offer them a choice, but they need to understand what they're choosing between. This could lead to war. With respect, sir, we're already at war. They just haven't admitted it yet. Another long silence. Then Adeyemi looked at someone off-screen and nodded. When he turned back to Elena, his expression had changed. There was still concern there, but also something else. Determination, maybe, or pride. Proceed with your plan, Ambassador, he said. You'll have full support from Earth, whatever you need. Thank you, sir, Elena said. There is one more thing. I'm going to need a demonstration. Something visible, something undeniable. What did you have in mind? Elena told him. This time the silence was even longer. When Adeyemi finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. That is an extremely aggressive posture, Ambassador. Yes, sir, it is. You're sure this is necessary? I'm sure that half measures won't work. They need to understand what we're capable of. All of it. Adeyemi conferred with the others again. A whispered conversation Elena couldn't hear. Finally, he nodded. You'll have your demonstration. It'll take us 30 hours to get everything in position. That gives you 6 hours before your deadline. That's cutting it close, sir. That's the point, Adeyemi said with a slight smile. Let them sweat a little. Good luck, Ambassador. And Elena, make us proud. The channel closed. Elena sat in the darkness of her quarters, feeling the weight of what she had just set in motion. In 30 hours, humanity would show the galaxy exactly what it was made of, and nothing would ever be the same again. The colony of New Helvetia hung in space like a blue and green jewel. It was one of humanity's newer settlements, established only 18 months ago on a world that reminded the first colonists of Switzerland back on Earth. Mountains carved the landscape into dramatic valleys, and lakes of startling clarity dotted the continents. The population was small, just over 40,000 people, but they had built something beautiful in their short time there. Colonel Sarah Martinez stood in the colony's Defense Coordination Center, watching the tactical display with growing tension. The Karvesh fleet had entered the system 3 hours ago. 12 warships, massive things that made Earth's cruisers look like toys. They had broadcast their intentions immediately. New Helvetia was to stand down and submit to Council authority. Failure to comply would result in forceful occupation. Sarah had sent the colonists to the shelters. The civilian population was as safe as she could make them. But the defense force under her command numbered only 200 soldiers and a handful of orbital platforms that were designed more for asteroid deflection than military action. Against a Karvesh fleet, they were laughably outmatched. She had requested instructions from Earth. The response had been immediate and unambiguous. Hold the line. Make them pay for every meter. Show them what humans do when backed into a corner. So that's what she was going to do. Karvesh fleet is broadcasting again, her communications officer said. They're giving us one more chance to surrender. Tell them we decline, Sarah said calmly, and activate the orbital minefield. Around New Helvetia, in carefully calculated orbits, hundreds of small objects activated. They had been positioned over the past 6 months, disguised as communication satellites and weather monitoring equipment. In reality, they were mines, each one packed with enough explosive force to cripple a ship. Not enough to win a battle against 12 Karvesh warships, but enough to make them bleed. The Karvesh response was immediate. Their warships opened fire, targeting the mines with precision laser strikes. But Sarah had expected that. The mines began moving, using small thrusters to evade and reposition. Some were destroyed. brilliant flashes of light against the darkness, but others survived and they were closing on the Karvesh formation. "They're moving to intercept our orbital platforms," her tactical officer reported. "Let them come," Sarah said. She opened a channel to her ground forces. "All units prepare for landing operations. Remember your training. We're not trying to win. We're trying to make them remember us." The first Karvesh landing craft began dropping toward the surface. Sarah watched them come, feeling that strange calm that soldiers know when the waiting is finally over and the action begins. She had fought in 3 engagements before taking this posting, all of them against pirates and raiders. This was different. This was war against a supposedly superior foe. She was going to teach them why that word supposedly mattered. The Karvesh landed in the Western Valley, a textbook military deployment. Heavy armor first, establishing a perimeter, then troop transports disgorging soldiers in perfect formation. Sarah counted over 1,000 warriors in the first wave alone. They wore powered armor that enhanced their already formidable strength, and they moved with the confidence of beings who had never lost a battle. That confidence was about to cost them. "Execute ambush point Alpha," Sarah ordered. The valley floor erupted. What the Karvesh had assumed was solid ground was actually a carefully disguised sinkhole, supported by explosive charges. When those charges detonated, 200 Karvesh warriors and a dozen armored vehicles dropped into a pit 50 meters deep. The ones that survived the fall found themselves under fire from prepared positions on the surrounding cliffs. Human soldiers, wearing active camouflage that made them nearly invisible, poured grenades and automatic weapons fire into the pit. The Karvesh tried to return fire, but they were in a kill zone with no cover. It took less than 5 minutes. When it was over, the valley floor was littered with Karvesh casualties. Sarah felt no joy at the sight. Just grim satisfaction. 1 ambush down, dozens more to go. The Karvesh commander, Warcast Dravok, stood on the bridge of his flagship and stared at the casualty reports with something approaching disbelief. 200 warriors lost in the first engagement. 200. His fleet hadn't suffered casualties like that in 5 centuries. How did they do this? He demanded. His tactical officer, a younger Karvesh named Threll, consulted the sensor logs. "They turned the terrain against us, Warcast. They prepared the battlefield before we arrived. Explosives, hidden positions, interlocking fields of fire. These are tactics from the old days. Before the Great Burning, before the Council had civilized warfare out of existence." Dravok felt something stir in his chest that he barely recognized. Excitement? Oh, that was inappropriate. This was a military action, not a gladiatorial contest. But still, something about the human's response called to an ancient part of him that his society had tried very hard to suppress. "Send in the second wave," he ordered. "Double the reconnaissance. I want every meter of ground scanned before we land. Warcast, the casualties." "I am aware," Dravok interrupted, "but we have our orders. The Council wants this colony secured. We will secure it." What he didn't say, what he couldn't say even to his own officers, was that part of him was glad for the challenge. The Karvesh were warriors. They had been warriors for millions of years before the Council had tamed them, turned them into glorified police officers. This what the humans were doing, this was real war. And despite the casualties, despite the shock, Dravok found himself respecting his enemy. The second wave landed with greater caution. The Karvesh used their orbital assets to scan the ground, detecting explosives and hidden positions. They landed in open terrain, away from potential ambush sites. They advanced slowly, checking every approach, using drones and sensors to sweep ahead of their main force. Sarah watched them come and smiled grimly. They were learning. Good. That would make the next part more interesting. "Release the drones," she ordered. From hidden bunkers across the colony, thousands of small aerial drones took flight. They were cheap things, barely more than flying bombs, but there were so many of them that they darkened the sky. The Karvesh point defense systems opened fire immediately, filling the air with laser fire and explosive rounds. Hundreds of drones were destroyed, but not all of them. The survivors slammed into Karvesh formations like a hammer. Explosions rippled across the battlefield. Armored vehicles were disabled or destroyed. Warriors in powered armor were thrown to the ground, their systems overloaded by the concentrated blasts. And in the chaos, human soldiers struck from concealed positions, hitting the disrupted Karvesh formations with precisely aimed fire. It was asymmetric warfare at its finest. The humans couldn't match Karvesh strength or technology, so they didn't try. They attacked supply lines. They set booby traps. They struck from unexpected angles and melted away before the Karvesh could respond. They turned the colony itself into a weapon, using their knowledge of the terrain to devastating effect. Days blurred together. The Karvesh pushed forward, taking ground meter by bloody meter. They learned to expect ambushes and prepared for them. They learned to check everything twice. They learned that fighting humans was nothing like the simulations and war games they had practiced for centuries. Sarah's forces were dying too. Slowly, inexorably, they were being ground down by superior numbers and firepower. But they made the Karvesh pay for every victory. When they had to abandon a position, they left it mined and booby-trapped. When they ran out of ammunition, they used improvised weapons made from industrial equipment. When they couldn't fight, they sabotaged and delayed. On the 7th day of the battle, Sarah received a priority transmission from orbit. The message was brief but clear. Earth was sending reinforcements. Hold for 3 more days. 3 days. Sarah looked at her remaining forces. She had less than 100 soldiers left who were combat effective. They were exhausted, running on stimulants and determination. The Karvesh had them surrounded in the mountains around the main settlement. It was only a matter of time. But 3 days. They could do 3 days. All units, she broadcast on the command channel. We've got relief coming. 3 more days. Let's give these bastards something to remember us by. The final stand took place in the mountain passes leading to the main settlement. Sarah had pulled back her forces to prepared positions, the last defensible ground before the colony proper. The Karvesh came at them in a coordinated assault, using orbital fire support to soften up the defenses before sending in ground forces. It should have been a slaughter. By all military logic, it should have ended in minutes. It took 6 hours. The humans fought like demons. They used the terrain with a skill that spoke of species' deep understanding of warfare. They knew when to fall back and when to hold. They knew how to make every bullet count. They knew how to die in ways that hurt the enemy most. Dravok led the final assault personally. He felt compelled to do so, to honor an enemy that had fought so well. He found Sarah Martinez in a bunker that overlooked the main pass, still firing her weapon even as Karvesh warriors closed in around her. When she finally ran out of ammunition, she drew a knife. A knife. Against warriors in powered armor with energy weapons. Dravok almost laughed at the absurdity of it. But there was no laughter in her eyes, only defiance. "Stand down," he told her in English, his translator rendering his words clearly. "You have fought with honor. There is no shame in surrender." "Tell that to your casualties," Sarah replied, not lowering her knife. Dravok's tactical display showed him the truth of her words. 1,200 Karvesh warriors dead or wounded, 3 ships damaged by orbital mine strikes, material losses that would take years to replace. All to take one small colony that should have fallen in days. "Why?" he asked, genuinely curious. "You knew you could not win. Why fight so hard?" Sarah smiled, and it was a terrible smile full of pain and pride. "Because we're human. We don't surrender just because the odds are bad. We fight, that's what we do. That's what we've always done. And we wanted to make sure you understood that before you tried this again." Before Dravok could respond, the sky lit up. He looked up to see human warships emerging from FTL at the system's edge. Not many, perhaps a dozen, but moving with the kind of coordinated precision that spoke of real military competence. His fleet was scattered around the planet, focused on ground operations. They were out of position. "Warcast," his flagship commander's voice crackled over the comm. "We have human warships inbound. They're launching fighters. Should we engage?" Dravok looked at Sarah Martinez, still standing defiant with her knife in hand, and he understood. This had never been about winning or losing. It had been about sending a message. The Karvesh had won the battle, but at such cost that it felt like a defeat. "No," he said slowly. "We have secured the colony. Fall back to orbit and prepare to withdraw." "Warcast?" His commander sounded confused. "You heard me," Dravok said. "We are leaving. Now." He looked at Sarah one more time. "Keep your knife, human. You earned it." Then he signaled his warriors to pull back. As they withdrew, Sarah finally allowed herself to collapse, her strength spent. Around her, the remaining human soldiers emerged from their positions, battered and bloodied but unbroken. They had held for 10 days, not 3. 10 days of hell that the Karvesh Empire would not soon forget. And across the galaxy, Reports of the battle were already spreading. The humans had been attacked. They had been vastly outnumbered, and they had made their attackers regret ever coming. In the council chamber on Centrum Prime, High Arbiter Zelthrin received the casualty reports with harmonics that expressed something between shock and horror. The Lumina Chorus Prime's crystals spun in agitated patterns, and Warcast Throm, reading the detailed battle logs, felt something he hadn't felt in 500 years. Fear and respect. The humans were not what the council had thought they were. They were not children playing with weapons they didn't understand. They were survivors of countless wars tempered by conflict, and they had brought those lessons with them to the stars. And now everyone knew it. It was asymmetric warfare at its finest. The humans couldn't match Karvesh strength or technology, so they didn't try. They attacked supply lines. They set booby traps. They struck from unexpected angles and melted away before the Karvesh could respond. They turned the colony itself into a weapon, using their knowledge of the terrain to devastating effect. Days blurred together. The Karvesh pushed forward, taking ground meter by bloody meter. They learned to expect ambushes and prepared for them. They learned to check everything twice. They learned that fighting humans was nothing like the simulations and war games they had practiced for centuries. Sarah's forces were dying too. Slowly, inexorably, they were being ground down by superior numbers and firepower. But they made the Karvesh pay for every victory. When they had to abandon a position, they left it mined and booby-trapped. When they ran out of ammunition, they used improvised weapons made from industrial equipment. When they couldn't fight, they sabotaged and delayed. On the 7th day of the battle, Sarah received a priority transmission from orbit. The message was brief but clear. Earth was sending reinforcements. Hold for 3 more days. 3 days. Sarah looked at her remaining forces. She had less than 100 soldiers left who were combat effective. They were exhausted, running on stimulants and determination. The Karvesh had them surrounded in the mountains around the main settlement. It was only a matter of time. But 3 days. They could do 3 days. All units, she broadcast on the command channel. We've got relief coming. 3 more days. Let's give these bastards something to remember us by. The final stand took place in the mountain passes leading to the main settlement. Sarah had pulled back her forces to prepared positions, the last defensible ground before the colony proper. The Karvesh came at them in a coordinated assault, using orbital fire support to soften up the defenses before sending in ground forces. It should have been a slaughter. By all military logic, it should have ended in minutes. It took 6 hours. The humans fought like demons. They used the terrain with a skill that spoke of species' deep understanding of warfare. They knew when to fall back and when to hold. They knew how to make every bullet count. They knew how to die in ways that hurt the enemy most. Dravok led the final assault personally. He felt compelled to do so, to honor an enemy that had fought so well. He found Sarah Martinez in a bunker that overlooked the main pass, still firing her weapon even as Karvesh warriors closed in around her. When she finally ran out of ammunition, she drew a knife. A knife. Against warriors in powered armor with energy weapons. Dravok almost laughed at the absurdity of it. But there was no laughter in her eyes, only defiance. "Stand down," he told her in English, his translator rendering his words clearly. "You have fought with honor. There is no shame in surrender." "Tell that to your casualties," Sarah replied, not lowering her knife. Dravok's tactical display showed him the truth of her words. 1,200 Karvesh warriors dead or wounded, 3 ships damaged by orbital mine strikes, material losses that would take years to replace. All to take one small colony that should have fallen in days. "Why?" he asked, genuinely curious. "You knew you could not win. Why fight so hard?" Sarah smiled, and it was a terrible smile full of pain and pride. "Because we're human. We don't surrender just because the odds are bad. We fight, that's what we do. That's what we've always done. And we wanted to make sure you understood that before you tried this again." Before Dravok could respond, the sky lit up. He looked up to see human warships emerging from FTL at the system's edge. Not many, perhaps a dozen, but moving with the kind of coordinated precision that spoke of real military competence. His fleet was scattered around the planet, focused on ground operations. They were out of position. "Warcast," his flagship commander's voice crackled over the comm. "We have human warships inbound. They're launching fighters. Should we engage?" Dravok looked at Sarah Martinez, still standing defiant with her knife in hand, and he understood. This had never been about winning or losing. It had been about sending a message. The Karvesh had won the battle, but at such cost that it felt like a defeat. "No," he said slowly. "We have secured the colony. Fall back to orbit and prepare to withdraw." "Warcast?" His commander sounded confused. "You heard me," Dravok said. "We are leaving. Now." He looked at Sarah one more time. "Keep your knife, human. You earned it." Then he signaled his warriors to pull back. As they withdrew, Sarah finally allowed herself to collapse, her strength spent. Around her, the remaining human soldiers emerged from their positions, battered and bloodied but unbroken. They had held for 10 days, not 3. 10 days of hell that the Karvesh Empire would not soon forget. And across the galaxy, reports of the battle were already spreading. The humans had been attacked. They had been vastly outnumbered, and they had made their attackers regret ever coming. In the council chamber on Centrum Prime, High Arbiter Zelthrin received the casualty reports with harmonics that expressed something between shock and horror. The Lumina Chorus Prime's crystals spun in agitated patterns, and Warcast Throm, reading the detailed battle logs, felt something he hadn't felt in 500 years. Fear and respect. The humans were not what the council had thought they were. They were not children playing with weapons they didn't understand. They were survivors of countless wars tempered by conflict, and they had brought those lessons with them to the stars. And now everyone knew it. The council chamber had never been so full. Every seat was occupied, every species represented. Word of the battle at New Helvetia had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The humans, the newest species, the ones the council had deemed dangerous and in need of control, had been attacked by a Karvesh fleet. And they had fought back with such ferocity that the Karvesh had withdrawn, something that hadn't happened in living memory for most species present. Elena stood in the waiting area with her expanded delegation. In addition to Marcus Amara and James, she now had representatives from Earth's military, scientific community, and cultural ministries. 12 humans in total, each one carefully chosen to represent a different aspect of humanity. This wasn't going to be a simple diplomatic session. This was going to be a statement. Warcast Throm appeared in the doorway. His forearms were held in a posture that Elena's cultural training identified as respectful, which was interesting given their last meeting. "Ambassador Vasquez, the council is ready for you. Thank you." "Warcast," Elena said formally. "Before you go in," Throm said quietly, his voice pitched so only she could hear. "I watched the battle recordings from New Helvetia. Your Colonel Martinez is a warrior of the highest order. I wish I could have faced her in honorable combat." "She's recovering in our medical facilities," Elena replied. "Perhaps you'll get that chance someday. On a training mat instead of a battlefield." Something that might have been a smile crossed Throm's face. "Perhaps." Then his expression became formal again. "A word of advice, human. The council is afraid. Afraid beings do dangerous things. Choose your words carefully." "I appreciate the warning," Elena said. "But I didn't come here to make the council comfortable. I came here to tell them the truth." Throm nodded slowly. "Then I will enjoy your speech." "Good fortune, Ambassador." The doors to the chamber opened. Elena led her delegation inside, and the noise hit her like a physical wave. Hundreds of species were talking at once, their translators creating a cacophony of overlapping voices. The moment the humans appeared, the noise cut off as if someone had thrown a switch. Elena walked to the central platform, her team arranging themselves behind her in a precise formation. She looked up at the tiers of seats meeting the eyes of delegates, both friendly and hostile. High Arbiter Zelthrin sat in its position at the apex, its crystalline body glinting in the chamber's light. The Lumina Chorus Prime hovered to its right, crystals spinning slowly. Throm took his position on the left. The council recognizes Ambassador Elena Vasquez of Earth. Zelthrin's harmonics carried clearly through the chamber. "You requested this full session. Speak." Elena took a breath. This was it. Everything that happened from this moment would define humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. "No pressure. High Arbiter, members of the Galactic Council, I stand before you today not to apologize but to explain. 5 days ago, a Karvesh fleet attacked the human colony of New Helvetia without provocation. They demanded our surrender. We refused. What followed was 10 days of combat that cost the Karvesh Empire over 1,200 warriors and 3 ships. Our casualties were similar. We lost 173 soldiers and 23 civilians who refused to evacuate. The chamber remained silent. Elena continued, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that this proves your fears about humanity, that we are violent, aggressive, dangerous, that we need to be controlled before we start another war like the Great Burning. She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. But you're wrong. And I'm going to tell you why. She gestured, and holographic displays sprang to life around the chamber. Images from Earth's history began playing. Ancient warriors with bronze weapons, medieval knights on horseback, soldiers in trenches during the world wars, nuclear explosions mushrooming over test sites. This is who we are, Elena said. This is humanity's history. We have fought wars for as long as we have existed. Over food, over land, over resources, over ideas, over gods, sometimes over nothing but pride. We created weapons of terrible power. We perfected the art of killing each other. By the time we reached the nuclear age, we had the capability to destroy our entire world dozens of times over. The images shifted, showing cities in ruins, fields of graves, memorials covered in names. We paid for this knowledge in blood, millions dead in our world wars. Entire cities obliterated in nuclear fire, generations scarred by the trauma of conflict. We came so close to extinction that we could see it waiting for us on the horizon. Elena let the images fade. But here's what you need to understand. We didn't step back from that edge because we became weak. We didn't survive by forgetting how to fight. We survived by understanding the true cost of warfare and choosing to find another way. She gestured again, and new images appeared. The United Nations building, the signing of peace treaties, the International Space Station, the launch of the first colony ships. We built a unified world government. We eliminated poverty and hunger. We reached for the stars. We did all of this while remembering every lesson we had learned. We didn't disarm. We didn't make ourselves helpless. We simply decided that cooperation was more valuable than conflict. Zelthran's harmonics interrupted her. Pretty words, Ambassador. But they do not change the fact that when pushed, your species defaults to violence. New Helvetia proves this. New Helvetia proves that we defend ourselves, Elena corrected sharply. We were attacked, High Arbiter. Attacked by your Karvesh Empire acting with council approval. What did you expect us to do? Surrender? Submit to occupation? Roll over and accept subjugation? We expected you to seek diplomatic resolution, the Lumina Chorus Prime chimed. Violence is never the answer. Violence is always an answer, Marcus said from behind Elena. It's just usually not the best one. The chamber erupted in angry harmonics, chimes, and vocalizations. Elena raised her hand for quiet, and surprisingly it came. My military advisor is correct, she said. Violence is a tool. Like any tool, it can be used wisely or foolishly. The difference is in understanding when and how to use it. And that, members of the council, is what you have forgotten. She accessed the historical data that Amara had compiled. New displays appeared showing the galaxy as it had been 3,000 years ago. The Great Burning, the war that nearly destroyed all civilization in this galaxy. I've read the accounts. I've studied the casualty figures. I've seen the images of worlds cracked open and stars extinguished. It was terrible. Unimaginable. The single worst catastrophe in galactic history. The chamber was absolutely silent now. And in response, you made yourselves weak. Elena said flatly. You outlawed weapons. You suppressed military training. You restructured your societies to eliminate competition and aggression. You convinced yourselves that you had evolved beyond warfare, but you didn't evolve. You traumatized yourselves into helplessness. How dare you? A delegate from a species Elena didn't recognize shouted. We chose peace over violence. We chose civilization over barbarism. You chose fear over strength, Elena shot back. And now you're paying the price. Tell me, how many border systems have you lost to external threats in the last 1,000 years? How many species on the galactic rim are preparing to invade council space because they've realized how weak you've become? How many of your own member species are restless under a system that denies them the right to defend themselves? She could see the effect her words were having. Some delegates looked angry. Others looked uncomfortable. A few looked thoughtful. Humanity has fought over 200 wars, Elena continued. But we've also made peace over 200 times. We understand warfare not as an abstract horror, but as a reality that must be managed. We know the cost. We remember the dead. And because we remember, we work every day to avoid paying that cost again. But we will never ever make ourselves defenseless. High Arbiter Zelthran's harmonics carried something new now. Not anger, but something that might have been curiosity. What is it you want, Ambassador? You have made your speech. You have insulted the Council. What now? Now, Elena said, I tell you what humanity offers, and what we demand. She gestured to her team and they stepped forward. Each one began speaking, presenting different aspects of human capability and culture. Military strength, scientific advancement, cultural achievements, economic potential. They painted a picture of a species that was powerful, yes, but also creative, adaptive, and willing to work with others. When they finished, Elena stepped forward again. We offer the galaxy a choice. Accept humanity as equal partners in the Council. Not junior members, not species in need of guidance, equals. We will contribute our military strength. We will share our tactical knowledge. We will help rebuild the defensive capabilities that you have allowed to atrophy. In return, you will treat us with the respect we have earned. And if we refuse? Zelthran asked. Then we leave, Elena said simply. We withdraw from Council space. We establish our own territories. We build our own civilization. And when the threats that are gathering on your borders finally come, when the species you have weakened and controlled finally rebel, when your 3,000-year-old peace finally falls apart, we will not be there to help. The chamber exploded into chaos. Delegates shouted in dozens of languages. The luminous crystals spun so fast they blurred. Even Zelthran's normally controlled harmonics became agitated. Elena raised her voice to be heard over the din. But before you make your decision, I want to show you something. Something that will help you understand exactly what humanity brings to this council. She tapped her communicator. Execute demonstration. Across council space and systems throughout the galaxy, something unprecedented happened. Stealth ships that had been hiding in asteroid fields and planetary rings suddenly decloaked. Hundreds of them, their positions precisely calculated to make a point without threatening any council assets. They had been there for days, undetected by even the most advanced council sensors. At the edge of the Centrum Prime system, a fleet of human warships emerged from FTL. Not just a few ships, but dozens. They moved in perfect formation, their weapons powered down but clearly visible. They took up positions around the system, not threatening but undeniably present. Throughout Council communication networks, subtle changes began appearing. Nothing harmful, nothing destructive, just small alterations that proved human cyber warfare specialists had access to systems that should have been impossible to infiltrate. Messages appeared on screens across the galaxy, simple text that read, "Humanity was here. We could have struck first. We chose to speak instead." In the council chamber, holographic displays showed all of this happening in real time. Delegates watched in stunned silence as humanity demonstrated capabilities that should have been impossible for such a young species. Elena let them watch for a full minute before speaking again. This is what we are capable of. This is what we have been doing, while you debated whether to control us. We have prepared. We have planned. We have positioned ourselves, not because we want war, but because we refuse to be helpless. She turned slowly, making eye contact with as many delegates as she could. Every species in this chamber has a choice to make. Accept us as equals and benefit from our strength, or reject us and wonder when we might become a threat instead of an ally. Choose wisely. Warcast Throm stood. His forearms moved in a gesture that Elena's translator identified as salute. I speak for the Karvesh Empire. We have faced humanity in combat. We have seen what they are capable of. We have counted our dead, and I say this, they are warriors. True warriors. The first we have encountered in 500 years. The Karvesh Empire votes to accept Earth as a full council member with all rights and privileges. The chamber erupted again, but this time with a different energy. Other military-focused species began standing, adding their voices to Throm's. The tipping point had been reached. The Lumina Chorus Prime's chimes were agitated. This is not how civilized beings behave. You cannot threaten us into acceptance when we're not threatening you, Elena said calmly. We're offering you a choice. There's a difference. High Arbiter Zelthran was silent for a long moment. Its harmonics, when they finally came, were complex, layered with meanings that Elena's translator struggled to render. But the core message was clear. The Great Burning taught us that warfare was horror, Zelthran said slowly. We forgot that it also taught us strength. We built our peace on the graves of billions and swore never to fight again. But in doing so, we forgot why we had fought in the first place. To protect what we valued, to defend those we loved, to ensure our survival in a hostile universe. The ancient being's many eyes fixed on Elena. Humanity remembers these lessons. Perhaps it is time we remembered them as well. I call for a vote. Should Earth be granted full membership in the Galactic Council, with all rights, privileges, and responsibilities that entails? The vote took an hour. Species after species cast their decision, some enthusiastic, some reluctant, some outright hostile. But when it was done, the result was clear. Earth had won. Elena stood on the platform, feeling the weight of what had just happened settle over her. Humanity had gambled everything on this moment. They had shown their teeth to the galaxy, and the galaxy had blinked first. As the chamber began to empty, Zelthran called down to her. "Ambassador Vasquez, a moment, please." Elena climbed to the high tier where the ancient Threzon waited. Up close, she could see the crystalline structures growing through its body, signs of its incredible age. It regarded her with eyes that had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. "You took a great risk today," Zelthran said quietly. "If the vote had gone differently, it would have meant war." "I know," Elena said. "But the alternative was slow subjugation. Better to risk everything than to surrender without a fight." Very human. Zelthran's harmonics carried what might have been amusement. "Tell me, Ambassador, do you truly believe your species can help us rebuild what we have lost?" "I believe we can try," Elena said. "We've learned a lot of hard lessons over the years. We'd like to share them if you're willing to listen. And if threats come, if your predictions about the borders prove correct, then we'll stand with you," Elena said simply. "That's what allies do." Zelthran was quiet for a moment. Then its harmonics shifted, becoming almost melancholy. "I was there, you know. During the Great Burning, I commanded fleets that destroyed entire star systems. I gave orders that killed billions. And when it was over, I swore I would never allow such horror to happen again. And you kept that promise," Elena said gently. "You built a civilization that has known peace for 3,000 years. That's an incredible achievement." "But it was peace born of weakness," Zelthran said. "Your words today made me realize that. We did not overcome our violent nature. We simply suppressed it until we forgot it existed. And now, when we need that strength again, we find ourselves helpless." "Not helpless," Elena corrected. "Just out of practice. We can help with that." Zelthran's eyes met hers, ancient and tired, but also curious. "I hope you are right, young human, for all our sakes." As Elena made her way back to her delegation, she allowed herself a small smile. They had done it. Humanity had stood before the galaxy and demanded respect, and the galaxy had given it. Now came the hard part, living up to the expectations they had just set. 3 months had passed since Elena's speech to the Galactic Council. 3 months since humanity had forced the galaxy to acknowledge them as equals rather than subjects. The time had been busy, complicated, and occasionally frustrating, but also deeply satisfying in ways Elena hadn't expected. She stood in her new office on Centrum Prime, watching the flow of ships through the orbital traffic lanes. Her position had changed. She was no longer just Earth's ambassador to the Council. She now held a seat on the Council itself, with full voting rights and authority. The youngest species in galactic history to achieve such status, and they had done it through a combination of diplomacy, military demonstration, and sheer audacity. Not everyone was happy about it. 3 species had withdrawn from the Council in protest, claiming that accepting a violent, militaristic species set a dangerous precedent. Elena didn't particularly miss them. The Vreen Collective had been passive-aggressive bureaucrats who obstructed every decision. The Helian Compact had been isolationists who rarely contributed anything anyway. And the Siltharian Unity had been pompous academics who treated every session like a philosophy seminar. But their departure had created space for others to step forward. Species that had been marginalized or overlooked suddenly found they had allies in the humans. The Karvesh, surprisingly, had become humanity's strongest supporters. Warcast Throm had thrown his considerable influence behind Earth's initiatives, and the partnership was bearing fruit. A chime announced a visitor. Elena turned from the window to see Marcus entering, followed by a Karvesh officer she didn't recognize. The Karvesh was young by their standards, perhaps only a few decades old, and its armor bore the marks of recent training exercises. "Ambassador," Marcus said formally, then grinned. Or should I say counselor? I still can't get used to that. Ambassador is fine when we're in private, Elena said, returning his smile. Who's your friend? This is Combat Instructor Vrel, Marcus said. He's been working with our tactical teams on the joint training program. Vrel, this is Ambassador Vasquez, the human who terrified the entire council into submission. Vrel made a gesture that Elena's translator identified as respectful greeting. An honor, Ambassador. Your speech has become required viewing in our military academies. We study it alongside the great warrior speeches of our history. I'm flattered, Elena said, gesturing for them to sit. How's the training program going? Beyond expectations, Marcus said enthusiastically. We've got 50 human military advisors working with Karvesh forces, teaching everything from small unit tactics to strategic planning. And Vrel's people are teaching us about powered armor combat and energy weapon systems. It's a good exchange, yeah, more than good, Vrel said. His four hands moved in animated gestures as he spoke. For 500 years we have practiced warfare as theory, forms without substance. We trained to fight opponents that no longer existed. But your people, you understand conflict at a fundamental level. You teach us to think like warriors again, not just soldiers. And in return you're making our forces much more effective, Marcus added. Their tech is incredible once you know how to use it properly. We're already incorporating powered armor into our own designs. Elena felt a surge of satisfaction. This was exactly what she had hoped would happen. Not just acceptance, but genuine cooperation. Species learning from each other, growing stronger together. What about the other species? She asked. Any interest from non-military focused members? The three Zan have asked for combat training, Marcus said, and he couldn't quite hide his surprise. Not for their military, they don't really have one anymore, but for security forces. They want to know how to defend their worlds if something happens. High Arbiter Zelthran personally requested that we train its people, Vrel added. It said that humanity had reminded them that peace and strength are not opposites. That true peace requires the ability to defend it. Elena nodded slowly. That was a significant shift in 3Zan philosophy. The most pacifistic species in the council was relearning how to fight. It was a good sign. Her communicator chimed. It was Dr. Amara Okonkwo, requesting a video link. Elena accepted, and Amara's face appeared on the holographic display looking excited. Elena, you need to see this, Amara said without preamble. I've been analyzing the cultural exchange data from the past 3 months. The results are remarkable. Show me, Elena said. Data and graphs appeared on the display. Trade figures, cultural exchange programs, diplomatic interactions, all trending upward at rates that seemed almost impossible. Human culture is spreading through council space faster than any previous new member, Amara explained. Our music, our art, our literature, it's all being consumed voraciously. But more importantly, our philosophy is taking root. The idea that strength and peace can coexist. That you can be capable of violence without being violent. It's resonating with species that have been suppressed by the Council's enforced pacifism. Is that good or bad? Elena asked. Both, Amara said honestly. It's destabilizing the old order. Species are questioning doctrines that have been in place for millennia, but it's also energizing them. I've seen more innovation, more creativity, more genuine engagement in the past 3 months than in the previous 3 years. The galaxy is waking up, Marcus was grinning. We're spreading like a virus, a freedom virus. A concerning metaphor, but not inaccurate, Amara said dryly. But Elena, there's something else. Something big. Tell me. The Council is getting reports from the border regions. The threats you warned them about? They're real. 3 different hostile civilizations are massing forces. They've been probing Council defenses for years, and now they're getting bolder. Without our warning, the Council might not have noticed until it was too late. Elena felt her stomach tighten. She had known this was coming, had warned the Council about it, but knowing and experiencing were different things. What's the Council's response? They're forming a joint task force, Amara said. Representatives from multiple species, humans included. They want you to help lead it. Elena looked at Marcus and Vrel. Both wore expressions of grim satisfaction. This was what they had prepared for. The moment when humanity would prove their value not just in words or demonstrations, but in actual defense of Council space. When do I meet with them? Elena asked. Tomorrow, Amara said. And Elena? High Arbiter Zelthran specifically requested that Colonel Martinez be part of the military contingent. Elena smiled. Sarah Martinez had recovered from her injuries on New Helvetia and had become something of a legend in both human and alien military circles. The colonel who had held off a Karvesh fleet with a handful of soldiers and determination. She was exactly the kind of person they needed. "I'll make sure she's there," Elena said. "Anything else?" "Just one thing," Amara said, and her expression became serious. "Not all species are happy about this. The Lumina Collective is claiming that humanity is militarizing the Council. They're calling for votes to limit our influence. They have support from about a dozen other species, mostly the ones who benefited most from the old pacifist order." "Of course they are," Elena sighed. "The Lumina have always been resistant to change. What's their play?" "They're proposing something called the Harmony Accords, basically a set of regulations that would limit military activity, ban certain types of weapons research, and establish oversight committees to monitor aggressive behavior. It's dressed up in language about preventing another great burning, but really it's just trying to put humanity back in a box." Elena thought about that. The Lumina were subtle, playing a long game. They couldn't directly oppose humanity now, not after the vote had gone in Earth's favor. But they could try to constrain human influence through bureaucracy and regulation. "When's the vote on these accords?" Elena asked. 2 weeks, Amara said. "They're pushing it through fast, trying to capitalize on nervousness about the border threats. Some species are worried that increased military presence will provoke conflict rather than prevent it." "The classic pacifist trap," Marcus said. "Assume that showing weakness will make enemies leave you alone." "It's not entirely wrong," Vril said quietly. All three humans turned to look at the Karvesh. "Excessive aggression can provoke responses that weakness would not. There is wisdom in not appearing too threatening. But there's a difference between not being threatening and being defenseless," Elena said. "We need to make sure the Council understands that distinction." They spent the next hour planning strategy, how to counter the Lumina's proposal without appearing aggressive, how to frame military readiness as responsible stewardship rather than warmongering, how to build coalitions with species who understood the need for strength but were nervous about human influence. After Marcus and Vrel left, Elena sat alone in her office thinking about everything that had changed in just 3 months. Humanity had gone from being on trial to being a key player in galactic politics. They had allies now, partners who respected their capabilities. But they also had enemies, species who feared change and saw humanity as a threat to the comfortable order they had built over millennia. Her communicator chimed again. This time it was Secretary General Adeyemi from Earth. "Councillor Vasquez," he said with a slight smile, "how goes the transformation of galactic civilization?" "Slowly but surely," Elena replied. "We're making progress, but there's resistance. The Lumina are trying to pass regulations that would limit our influence." "I saw the proposal," Adeyemi said. "Political containment when military containment failed. Classic move. What do you need from Earth?" "Support," Elena said. "Both political and material. We need to show the Council that humanity is committed to their defense, not just our own interests. I'm proposing that we offer to station defense fleets in 3 border systems. No charge, no strings attached. Just genuine support." Adeyemi whistled softly. "That's a significant commitment. We'd be putting our people in harm's way to defend species who were trying to subjugate us 3 months ago." "I know," Elena said. "But it's necessary. We need to show that our strength is meant to protect, not threaten. We need to demonstrate that human military power serves peace, not just human interests." "You're asking us to be the galaxy's shield," Adeyemi said slowly. "I'm asking us to be what we've always been," Elena corrected. "Defenders. Sometimes of ourselves, sometimes of others, but always standing against those who would prey on the weak. It's what we did on Earth when we formed the UN. It's what we should do here." Adeyemi was quiet for a long moment. "The Security Council will need to vote on this, but I'll support it. You've built something remarkable out there, Elena. Don't let it fall apart because of political games." After the call ended, Elena returned to the window. The traffic lanes were busy, ships from dozens of species moving in careful patterns. Each one represented someone's home, someone's dreams, someone's future. The galaxy was vast and full of wonder, but it was also dangerous. The threats gathering on the borders proved that. Her door opened without announcement. Elena turned to see High Arbiter Zelthrun entering, its multiple limbs moving in a pattern she had learned indicated contemplation. "High Arbiter," she said, surprised. "I wasn't expecting you." "I have been thinking." Zelthrun's harmonics were soft, almost meditative. "About your speech 3 months ago. About what you said regarding strength and weakness, fear and courage." "And?" Elena prompted. "I have lived for over 3,000 years," Zelthrun said slowly. "I have seen civilizations rise and fall. I have witnessed the birth of stars and the death of worlds. And in all that time I believed I had found wisdom. I believed that by choosing peace at any cost, we had evolved beyond the barbarism that nearly destroyed us." The ancient being moved closer to the window, looking out at the traffic lanes with eyes that had seen too much. "But you made me realize something. We did not overcome our nature. We ran from it. We built a cage of doctrine and philosophy and called it enlightenment, and inside that cage we grew weak." Elena said nothing, sensing that Zelthrun needed to speak. "The Lumina are afraid," Zelthrun continued. "They see humanity changing the Council, and they fear it will lead to another great burning. But they are wrong. The great burning happened because we had forgotten the cost of warfare. We fought because fighting was easy, because we had never truly suffered from it. By the time we understood what we were doing to ourselves, it was almost too late." "But you survived," Elena said gently. "You rebuilt." "We survived by forgetting," Zelthrun corrected. "By burying the memories so deep that we convinced ourselves they never happened. By making warfare so taboo that even speaking of it became dangerous. We thought we were preventing another catastrophe. Instead, we were ensuring that when the next threat came, we would be helpless." The High Arbiter turned to face Elena fully. "Your species remembers. You carry the scars of your wars openly. You teach your children about the horrors you inflicted on each other. You do not hide from your nature. And because you remember, you understand the true cost of both war and peace." "We try," Elena said. "We don't always succeed. We're not perfect, High Arbiter. We still have conflicts, disagreements, violence, but we've learned to manage it, to channel it into productive directions. Sports competition, exploration. We found ways to satisfy our aggressive instincts without destroying ourselves. And that is what you offer the galaxy," Zelthrun said. "Not just military strength, but the wisdom of species that has walked through fire and emerged stronger." "If you'll let us," Elena said. "The Lumina want to constrain us, to put limits on what we can do, who we can train, how we can help. If their harmony accords pass, we'll be right back where we started." "They will not pass," Zelthrun said firmly. "I will oppose them, and I will use whatever influence I still possess to ensure others do the same. The Lumina mistake caution for wisdom. They think that by preventing action they prevent disaster. But sometimes action is what prevents disaster." Elena felt relief wash over her. Having Zelthrun's support would make an enormous difference. The ancient Threzan was respected across the galaxy, its voice carrying weight that even the Lumina couldn't easily dismiss. "Thank you, High Arbiter," she said sincerely. "Do not thank me yet," Zelthrun replied. "I have a request. A proposal, if you will." "I'm listening." "I want you to train my people," Zelthrun said. "Not just security forces. All of my species. I want you to teach us what you have learned. How to be strong without being cruel. How to defend without becoming aggressors. How to remember the cost of violence while maintaining the capability for it." Elena felt the weight of that request. The Threzan were one of the oldest, most influential species in the Council. If they fully embraced human philosophy, if they started rebuilding their military capabilities under human guidance, it would shift the balance of power in the galaxy. "That's a significant undertaking," she said carefully. "It would take years, decades maybe, and it would fundamentally change your society." "I know," Zelthrun said, "but it is necessary. The threats on our borders are real. The reports we're receiving suggest they will move within the year. And when they do, we must be ready, not with treaties and diplomatic protests, but with actual strength." "What changed your mind?" Elena asked. 3 months ago, you were ready to subjugate us. Now you want us to rebuild your military." Zelthrun's harmonics carried something that might have been humor. "I watched the recordings from New Helvetia. I saw your Colonel Martinez and her soldiers fight with a dedication I thought was lost to history. And I realized something. They were not fighting because they enjoyed violence. They were fighting because they refused to surrender what they had built. They were defending their home, their people, their future. That is not barbarism. That is civilization. The High Arbiter moved toward the door, then paused. The Council meets tomorrow to discuss the Joint Task Force. I suggest you bring a proposal for comprehensive military cooperation. Not just training, but a complete restructuring of Council defense capabilities. It is time we stopped pretending the galaxy is safe simply because we wish it to be. After Zelthrin left, Elena sat down heavily. This was bigger than she had anticipated. She had come to the Council hoping to secure humanity's independence. Instead, she was being asked to reshape galactic civilization itself. She opened a channel to Earth, requesting an emergency session with the Security Council. This was too big a decision to make alone. The next day, the Council chamber was packed again. Word had spread that something significant was going to be announced, and every species wanted to be present. Elena stood on the central platform, flanked by a delegation that included Colonel Martinez, now fully recovered and wearing her dress uniform with quiet pride. Warcast Throm spoke first, presenting the situation on the borders. Hostile forces massing, probe attacks increasing, intelligence suggesting coordinated invasion plans. The species involved were ones that had rejected Council membership centuries ago, viewing the galactic civilization as weak and ripe for conquest. Then Elena stepped forward. Members of the Council, we face a choice. We can respond to this threat the way the Council has always responded. Diplomatic protests, economic sanctions, measured, cautious steps that signal we are not willing to fight. Or we can do something different. She activated holographic displays showing fleet positions, defensive networks, military capabilities. Earth proposes the formation of a unified defense initiative, a coordinated military force drawn from all member species, trained to modern standards, equipped with the best technology we can provide. Not an army of conquest, but a force dedicated to protecting Council space and all who live within it. The Lumina Chorus Prime's crystals spun rapidly. This is exactly what we feared. Militarization disguised as protection. You seek to make the Council dependent on human military strength. No, Colonel Martinez said, stepping forward. Her voice was firm, carrying the authority of someone who had fought and bled for her beliefs. We seek to make the Council capable of protecting itself. There's a difference, and she gestured and new images appeared. Training programs, technological exchanges, joint exercises. Every species contributes what they can. The Karvesh provide warrior training. The Thrizan offer strategic planning. The Helion, if they choose to return, could share their sensor technology. And humans? We provide the one thing this galaxy has been missing for 3,000 years, the knowledge of how to fight a real war. And when this war is over, another delegate asked, what happens to this military force you've built? Who controls it? The Council does, Elena said. Through democratic vote, just like everything else. We're not proposing a human-controlled military. We're proposing that the Council remember how to defend itself. With human help, yes, but under Council authority. High Arbiter Zelthrin rose. The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew that Zelthrin's opinion would likely decide the matter. I have lived long enough to see patterns repeat, Zelthrin said. Civilizations rise when they are strong and unified. They fall when they grow weak and divided. For 3,000 years we have been falling. Slowly, imperceptibly, but falling nonetheless. We have retreated from our borders. We have ignored threats. We have convinced ourselves that our philosophy makes us superior, when in reality it has made us vulnerable. The ancient being's harmonics grew stronger. Ambassador Vasquez is correct. It is time we stopped pretending. The galaxy is not a safe place. It never has been. Peace is not a natural state that exists in absence of conflict. It is an achievement that must be constantly defended, and we cannot defend it if we have forgotten how to fight. Zelthrin's many eyes swept the chamber. I call for a vote. Should the Council accept Earth's proposal and establish the Unified Defense Initiative? The debate lasted for hours. Species argued passionately on both sides. The Lumina and their allies painted visions of renewed warfare, of the galaxy sliding back into the barbarism of the Great Burning. The Karvesh and others spoke of responsibility, of the duty to protect those who could not protect themselves. In the end, the vote was closer than Elena had hoped, but clear enough to matter. The Unified Defense Initiative was approved. Humanity would lead the effort to rebuild Council military capabilities, but under Council oversight and with contributions from all willing species. The Lumina Collective announced they would abstain from participation. Several other species followed suit, but many more signed on, eager to learn, to grow stronger, to be something more than victims waiting for the next threat. After the session ended, Elena found herself surrounded by delegates asking questions, making proposals, offering support. It was overwhelming, but also exhilarating. They had done it. Humanity had not just secured their place in galactic civilization. They had begun reshaping that civilization into something new. Colonel Martinez appeared at her elbow, gently extracting her from the crowd. "You look like you could use a drink, Ambassador." "God, yes," Elena said. "A very large drink." They found a quiet observation deck where they could see Centrum Prime rotating below them, a beautiful world that had never known war. Elena hoped it would stay that way, but now at least it would have a chance. "What you said in there," Elena said to Sarah, "about the Council protecting itself. You believe that?" "I believe we have to try," Sarah said. "New Helvetia taught me something. The Karvesh came expecting an easy victory, because they'd forgotten what real combat looks like. They learned. Now we need to make sure the rest of the galaxy learns before the next threat arrives. And if we fail? If we can't train them fast enough?" Sarah smiled, and it was the smile of a warrior who had looked death in the eye and chosen to fight anyway. "Then we hold the line ourselves. Like we always have. It's what humans do." Elena thought about that, about humanity's long history of standing against impossible odds, about soldiers who fought not because they loved violence, but because they refused to surrender what they loved, about the thin line of people who stood between civilization and chaos, not seeking glory but simply doing what needed to be done. "The galaxy doesn't understand us yet," she said quietly. "They see our strength and they fear we'll become conquerors." "Let them fear," Sarah said. "Fear means respect, and respect means they'll listen when we tell them what's coming." 3 weeks later, the first joint training exercises began. Human military advisors working alongside Karvesh warriors, teaching Threezon strategists, training species who had never fired a weapon in anger. It was messy, complicated, and occasionally frustrating. But it was also necessary. The Harmony Accords were voted down. The Lumina accepted the defeat with grace, though Elena suspected they would try again in different forms. That was fine. Debate was healthy. Disagreement was part of civilization. As long as it remained words and not weapons, Elena could live with opposition. Reports from the borders continued to be concerning. The hostile forces were still massing, still probing, but now Council forces were ready. They had established defensive positions. They had coordinated response plans. They had remembered how to be strong. 6 months after Elena's speech, Earth received a formal request from the Council. They wanted to establish an academy for military training, to be built on Centrum Prime itself, a symbol that the Council no longer feared strength, but embraced it as a tool for peace. They wanted humanity to help design it, to teach in it, to ensure that the lessons learned over humanity's bloody history would not be forgotten. Elena stood in her office reading the request, feeling the weight of history pressing down on her. This was it, the moment when everything changed, when humanity stopped being the new species, the dangerous children, and became something else. Teachers, protectors, partners in the grand experiment of galactic civilization. She approved the request, and somewhere, in the darkness between stars, in the places where civilizations rose and fell and the universe continued its endless dance, perhaps something noticed, perhaps something recognized that on this particular spiral arm of this particular galaxy, a species had emerged that remembered an old truth. That peace was not the absence of conflict. It was the choice to fight for something better. And that those who chose peace while remaining capable of war were the strongest of all. Elena Vasquez stood at her window watching the ships pass, and she smiled. Humanity had spoken. The Council had listened. And now together they would face whatever came next. Not as conquerors or subjects, but as equals who understood that the galaxy belonged to those who had the strength to defend it and the wisdom to know when not to.